Thanks, Kerry. Welcome back. You missed one important event that went on this morning where the Socceroos made their last 16. So on the strength of that, there are three legs to the investment thesis for Kin. The first, Kerry has already touched on, the consolidation play going on in the Leonora area. But Kin also is an advanced explorer and developer. We already have 1.4 million ounces of resource and approved mining projects ready for mining. And in my view, we have the best exploration upside in the district. And I'll touch on the exploration upside in a bit more detail, and I'll touch on the 1.4 million ounces. But the thing that everybody wants to talk about, and the thing that I've received most questions about, is the explanation of the consolidation going on. I'll get to that in a bit more detail at the back end of the presentation, but these are the players in the district: St Barbara, Red 5, who you'll hear from later on this afternoon, Genesis, ourselves and Dacian. Dacian are in the brown on the right-hand side, and they are under takeover offer from Genesis currently. Kin has about 10% of Dacian, so we are in an interesting position, having a foot in both the western side of the consolidation and a foot in the eastern side of the consolidation. The prize is very significant here, and I'll touch on that in more detail at the back end of the presentation. The capital structure of Kin, interesting and unusual for a junior. So we have two large shareholders, Delphi Group, high net worth family office out of Germany, with 35%, and St Barbara with 15%. So collectively, those two are approaching half the register. And retail shareholders actually want big, long-term, strategic, well-heeled investors who stay with the stock for a long period of time, because you don't want to be at the mercy of the market with low-priced, opportunistic takeovers, and large shareholders on the register prevent that. Management team, new addition, Leah Moore out of Bellevue, just recently started. You'll see by the bios that we all have a bias towards development and operations management. So you should read into that that's the direction that we wish to take the company. The exploration upside, and there are 3 or 4 slides associated with this. The main part of the asset base of Kin is on the eastern side of the whole Leonora region. 1.2 million ounces in this Cardinia gold camp, as I've called it on the slide there. And while it's had a reasonable amount of exploration in the near-surface environment over an extended period of time, it's only recently that we've started drilling some deeper holes with some significantly higher grade material in it. And really that's the message that I want people to take away from this, that it's a developing camp, not necessarily a fully established one yet. This is a gravity image of the eastern side of that Cardinia block. The blue, the dark blue areas are low gravity rocks, so they are felsic intrusions, buried felsic intrusions, and all the gold mineralisation in that whole area sits above or around the outside edges of those felsic intrusions. It's a well understood geological model. For scale here, that picture's 5 kilometres north-south by about 2.5 kilometres east-west, so it's a very significant block of ground. There's 6 deposits in the near-surface environment have been defined there so far, and I've listed some of the better intersections associated with those Helens, Cardinia Hill, Helens East, Fiona, etc. deposits. But it's really about the deeper deposit, the deeper intersections that I've highlighted in red there on the left-hand side of the slide, that I need or would like investors to appreciate. This has only just been scratched at the surface. The vast majority of the drilling here is only down to about 60 metres vertical into that oxide zone. So there's going to be a lot more gold come out of this, and this is why we're now referring to this as the Cardinia Gold Camp rather than just a series of non-related deposits. An example of what that looks like in the third dimension at a project called Helens East. So on this section, there were some historical drill holes, again to that sort of 40 or 50 metre depth. Some of the intersections were a bit scratchy, had difficulty putting it together, but once we get underneath that into the sulphide zone, the drill hole there, number 22 on the left-hand side, hit 7 metres at 24 grams, and then drilled through to the other side of that felsic volcanic unit and got some more intersections there. We're in the process of deepening that with a diamond hole as we speak. So my expectation is the near-surface environment is lower grade and not as continuous, but once you get into the sulphide zone, it's a reasonably obvious mineralisation. It's high grade and it's repeatable. 100 metres long strike here. There's 5 metres at 12, another 100 metres long strike. There's 21 metres at 3.5. So it's really starting to turn into and develop into quite a substantial ore system. And this is just one of the 6 that we have at our disposal. Another example, and you'll note that in this example, the mineralisation is relatively steep west. Another example a bit further north, a kilometre or so further north, at a project called Rangoon. It's a shallow east-dipping mineralisation. Again, the near-surface environment, 4 metres and 11 metres at about 2 grams. You get underneath that into the sulphide environment and it turns into a 30, or 25 and 30 and 40 metre intersections, albeit at 1 gram, but they are still relatively shallow. That's all in the top 100 metres. And so you can imagine a relatively shallow 100 metre deep open pit there at a stripping ratio of about 3 to 1 at a bit better than 1 gram, gram and a half, is a reasonably solid economic performer for that kind of deposit. We have been looking for the key to unlocking this high-grade material. We think we've found it in some reprocessing of old IP surveys that were done back in 2013. So discovery, in my view, is a combination of good science and luck, and this is Kin's stroke of luck. So in 2013, when this project was in receivership from Navigator Resources, which owned it, the receiver was asked by a well-meaning geologist to undertake some tenement expenditure work, and they did an IP survey because it covered lots and lots of strike extent of the tenements, and they were able to spread that expenditure over lots of tenure and saved it and kept it within the organisation. We have reprocessed that, almost 10 years after it was undertaken. The top line of 3 black squares that you see there is where that IP line has been reprocessed, and we have drilled into it. We've hit the mineralisation in the very first hole there, so that's that central hole of those 3. The other 2 have been drilled and we're waiting on assay results for all of those. These IP surveys are very broad spaced, so they're 1,500 metres apart, those lines, so not close enough to be able to model anything with this IP yet, but a high IP anomaly is driven by the sulphide mineralisation associated with this kind of rocks, this kind of mineralisation style. What that first hole looks like, and we don't have any assays back on that as yet. They're due in about 2 weeks' time. At 104 metres, we hit about 30 metres of mineralisation. It has some free gold in it. It has some laminated quartz veins, which is the style that you see at Rangoon in other places. A little bit further down the hole, about 50 metres of mineralisation where there are some unmineralised pieces in there, but there are several laminated vein mineralisation examples down there. And then at the bottom of the hole, 266 metres down hole, we hit 13 metres of disseminated and matrix sulphides. Visual estimates are about 5% pyrite, and that looks exactly like all of the other mineralisation that we've seen in this deep drilling. So I'd be extremely surprised if it doesn't come back with very good grade in it. What grade that will be, don't know. It's too difficult to tell in this particular example, but free gold's a reasonably good indicator. That's what the mineralisation looks at that 266 metres downhole. As I mentioned, we've done 5 of these holes into 5 IP anomalies. This is the first one. The other 4 have been completed, and we'll wait for assay results on those before we report all those. When you make concentrates out of that sulphide material, and typically the mineralisation in the oxide and transitional zone gives you mid-90s recovery, 93, 94, 95, averages 94.5. When you get into the sulphide material, you still get reasonable recovery, but it is lower down because some of the gold is within the pyrite. So you can see in that top right hand micro photograph of concentrates, there is a little piece of gold sitting inside that pyrite grain, which you have to grind it extremely finely to be able to access that piece of gold. And that's why the recovery is lower if you just go through conventional plants. But when you go to flotation and fine grinding and leaching, it's not a particularly novel process. It's well understood and well practiced all around the world. You get somewhere between 91.5% and 97% recovery out of that. So my expectation is it might be 93 or 94% recovery on average. The concentrates it produces, you get about a 10% mass yield, 10.7% on average. And that concentrate grades on average 27 grams gold and 23% sulphur. So as an example, if you took 1 million tonnes of this material and you put it through that process, you'd produce 107,000 tonnes of concentrate at 27 grams gold, about 100,000 ounces a year. So it's pretty easy to see that at about 1 million tonnes a year of this type of material, you can produce about 100,000 ounces. Consolidation. The prize here is all of the producers in that area will produce about 650,000 ounces a year, a combination of the 3 processing plants that are operating there at the moment. If they're all under one umbrella, that would make that area the 3rd largest gold producer in Australia. Currently, the 3rd largest gold producer in Australia is Evolution. They do just under 650,000 ounces a year, and their market cap is $5 billion today. The sum of the parts of all the market caps of all those 5 players is $1.75 billion. So there's a significant uplift in market appreciation and market valuation if the consolidation can go forward. There are going to be, and I don't know which pathway that consolidation might take, and there are several pathways it could take, but you need a seat at the table to be able to participate in that, and Kin has bought itself a seat at the table by taking a 10% stake in the takeover of Dacian by Genesis. So my expectation here is this consolidation will go ahead because the valuation uplift for all the players will be so significant that it'll be impossible to resist. How that is playing out at the moment, you'll hear from Red 5 this afternoon. The 2 big process plants in the region are Red 5's and Dacian's at Mount Morgans. Dacian have sought expressions of interest for use of that processing plant because they've run out of ore for themselves to be able to treat. Those expressions of interest are due by the 5th of September, and we'll submit our expression of interest probably tomorrow. So Kin is certainly participating in this in a pretty serious way. So my preferred development option is a partnered development for Kin, where Kin supplies ore to one of the 3 processing plants in the region. All 3 of those processing plants are ideally suited to Kin's oxide and transitional material. One of those processing plants, and it's St Barbara's processing plant, has been mooted as being converted to one of these specialist plants with sulphide flotation, which would be, again, ideally suited to Kin sulphide ores. There is the chance, albeit it's not my preferred option, to go standalone, but we would need to be onto something very significant in terms of an exploration discovery to justify building a standalone plant out at Cardinia, albeit that Kin had a failed attempt of that 3 or 4 years ago. In summary, the 3 key legs: experienced and established explorer and developer with 1.4 million ounces, a seat at the table with the consolidation, and really good exploration upside. Thank you for your attendance.
Thanks, Andrew.